Welcome to another live stream. We're going to talk about gang stalking as usual. And there's there's so much material to go over. You just never run out. And it is a very immaculate scientific game that you are playing. Targeted individuals, when they first experienced gang stalking, at least for me, I underestimated what I was dealing with. Okay. It seemed just like a bunch of people who just wanted to play a little game. Okay. And I think we've all dealt with that. I know when I was growing up, and I'm not getting into the people that, have been targeted individuals all their life. I think there's a lot of people out there, but everyone has dealt with little games. Okay. People messing with you or, trying to, play with your head or whatever. They get together and they bully you or, whatever. And we've all played those games, but gang stalking is beyond that. Okay. But when you first start to experience this, you don't know what's going on. You don't know what to think. Yeah, you have no idea what you're really in for. It seems as though, there's just a bunch of people who've gotten together and you assume that, it's some kind of game or whatever. And that's, of course, early on. But as you move through this experience of gang stalking, you realize that, this stuff isn't going away. Okay. And these people are not playing a game. It seemed like you're getting little comments and you didn't even know what to think. I didn't, this person's trying to play with me or whatever. And then you start noticing it from different angles and there are themes involved. And then you get the personal info and you're like, okay, now it's starting to get weird. And then, people are breaking in and when I think back on what I dealt with, it was all just, a lot of foreplay. And it actually started quite a few years before, the actual overt harassment. In fact, I could go back to childhood. Okay. And that's one of the things that you have to know when you're dealing with this, because gang stalking can manifest in a lot of different ways. Okay. I've mentioned that you have a connection between all these different things, and individuals tend to hyper focus on one or the other aspect of it, whether it's the government aspect or maybe the secret societies or whatever. It's all of it. Some people will say it's all just Satanism and witchcraft. Other people, that stuff's not real. It's just technology. It's everything, man. And, certain situations apply to certain people. Not everybody's dealing with the same thing, but there are targets out there who are dealing with everything. There are people who are dealing with some type of sub-program of MKUltra or some other type of Tavistock Institute, mind, game or something, some type of brainwashing experiment or a behavioral modification experiment, or maybe it's to experiment on on people to find ways to silence whistleblowers or whatever. And, it can be isolated to certain, parameters. But, really, technically, there's usually a lot more going on. And the foreplay, well, it's confusing, right? I remember hearing comments way back even into my childhood that I know when I'm looking at this whole thing that I'm dealing with something that is fundamentally evil and spiritual and demonic. And yes, there's technology. There's secret societies. All that stuff comes into play. It does. But it's evil. And, the thing that I'm emphasizing is that there is a plan. There is a setup for a lot of the targets. Some people get thrown into it randomly and they're just dealing, with workplace harassment. They don't have that foreplay. Okay. They don't have, a lot of the, the foreshadow that some of the targets out there are dealing with. And some people, just because they deal with this stuff when they're kids or whatever, doesn't mean that it's, some kind of witchcraft cult or something like that, because MK Ultra and some of the programs that went along with it, they experimented on children. There was people in the military and the secret societies and all that stuff that were approached, and they basically, donated their kids to this thing, for experimentation. And some of them knew that it was risky. Other people thought it was probably, some type of experimental therapy or whatever. A lot of the people that were involved in MK Ultra, the professional individuals, the doctors, the nurses, and stuff. Some of them didn't know that this was, to covertly experiment on, both citizens from Canada and the United States. They thought they were working on, new innovative forms of therapy. And of course, they found out later that that's not what was going on. But there are those things that happen, and that setup, that introduction to this game you're playing can involve a lot of those things. And I've talked about the themes involved in Gangstalking before, whether you're talking about some of the intense directed conversations that targets will deal with. And I can think back, and I remember the people would say things to me, right? That'll be for later, or whatever. We're going to drive you crazy, or, just these conversations. I'm afraid to even say some of them. And it was just too obvious to me. But at the time, I didn't know, right? You don't. In fact, when a lot of this stuff was going on, even right, at the time it became overt, I was wondering what the hell these people were on. What you having a bad day or something? You having what's up with you? And you get all this chaos, and it just seems random. It seems primitive. But like I said at the beginning of the video, people have a tendency to underestimate what they're dealing with, and it is a setup. It was for me. Maybe there are people out there listening who, you just kind of got thrown into this randomly. Maybe it's just workplace harassment or surveillance or whatever. You're not dealing with electronic harassment or covert poisoning, food tampering, break-ins. There's people out there who they don't experience V2K, right? There's people out there that don't deal with the demonic stuff, with the phenomena, with things getting knocked around in their house or whatever. And some people would speculate that's technology too, but of course I've mentioned before that comes from the spiritual dimension. And when you finally trace all this stuff back, it all has an origin back in the Genesis 6 account, but you don't know. That's the other problem that targets are dealing with when this whole thing kicks off. And I remember getting a lot of threats, a lot of little suggestions. And there were times where I know that I was dealing with something spiritual and very evil. And I've talked about that before. Whether it's someone who's influenced and something is literally talking, to you through them, and you're not dealing with the person anymore. A lot of targets will deal with that. And, then of course they snap out of it or whatever. And you're like, what the hell was that? And they're talking to you about something that you don't know. And this person doesn't remember or whatever. It can get really freaky. But then you start dealing with a multifaceted, attack methodology that Gangstalking employs, where you start getting it all over the place, all from different directions. I've talked about the fact they want targets in a place where they can be, reprogrammed. Okay. Not only are they traumatized, not only are they dealing with that, And of course, you can see that in a broader sense where society has been subjected to that stuff, whether it's the 9/11 incident, the September 11th, where that people were subjected to watching the towers collapse and people jumping out of buildings, burning, the Falling Man episode, and all these things going on, and it's just over and over. And you can even see that in the Kennedy assassination. That stuff probably was hatched out of different programs, probably connected to the Tavistock Institute. The brainwashing, think tank, and there's a lot of stuff that's connected to those things. But when people are subjected to that, they become susceptible, right? When targets are attacked, when they're traumatized, when they experience a life change like that, they become susceptible to that type of mind control. And then of course the fact that they're getting it from many different angles and that multifaceted methodology, they start wondering how these people know, how are these people connected? What the hell is going on? How is this even logistically possible? Depending on who you're dealing with. Like I said, there's people out there, you might just be getting followed around. There's way too many coincidences going on here. And what's up with those comments and this and that and the other. And it's a lot more subtle, but there's people out there that they just find themselves enveloped in this, logistically impossible scenario. You can't even figure it out. There's so much science behind this, in the sense that every little aspect of this puppetry complements another level of what happens. And I've talked about that. Targets will try to get help, or they'll start talking to someone, or they'll reach out for help, and it's like a meat grinder. It's people are acting strange anyway for targets, and that's typical for the people that are getting gang stalked. And not only are they they're getting this multifaceted attack from different places where they're looking for it everywhere, and then of course now they're processing information with apprehension. They have the very hyper vigilant mindset. The paranoia is kicking in, and then people around them are treating them differently, and you're like, oh, now what's going on? How is that even possible? Some of it can be done where people are literally contacted. There's a literal collusion, and some people are literally being influenced spiritually, in my opinion. And I've talked about the correlation effect, where individuals, it's interesting when you see someone being persecuted. That scapegoat dynamic is out there, and people are just miserable enough where they need someone to vent on. They just have to find a good reason to do it. I've talked about some of the disinformation and smear campaigns that targets will deal with, and it's all it takes. People are struggling anyway. It's different. You get into things like the Stanford experiment, or other scientific inquiries into the minds of people who are just kind of role playing or whatever. And they'll do it. They just have to have a good enough excuse, right? You look around and you think people are going to be reasonable. The world that you live in, you think you can expect logic and reasonability, and people are opening the door for one another, and everything is civil. And you go through something like the pandemic we went through, you see people fighting over toilet paper, and that's reality. Okay, when targets get thrown into this menagerie of gang stalking, it's ball right back to reality. All that other stuff is just a facade. People are as civilized as they are allowed to be in their circumstances. When you get spirits manipulating people, when you get people who are out there experiencing frustration anyway, and then you get a disinformation campaign. Oh, this person's a drug dealer or an offender, or what? Oh yeah, or money is involved. Just give me enough of a reason, I'll take that. Oh, they're selling meth, or they're some kind of offender. Oh yeah, I'll do it. Oh, you can go ahead and set up your stuff in my garage. Hit them with that, whatever the hell that thing is. Just make sure it doesn't point at us. Make sure we don't get caught or whatever. But people just need that reason. They just need to be agitated when the target starts to deal with that stuff. It's a complete environmental tyrannical scenario, and they don't know what's going on. And of course, the directed conversations and the street theater and the innuendos and all the stuff that targets are dealing with, it just doesn't seem possible. And people try to explain it. Like I said, they'll try to reach out for help, or they'll try to talk to someone, of course, and then you have the basic principle of plausible deniability. It surrounds this whole methodology of gangstalking, right? All the things that are done to targets. It doesn't seem to be a logical motive for it, right? It doesn't seem possible, right? And I've mentioned that there's a small minority of people who are subjected to this. It wouldn't work otherwise, and you see that in the spiritual dimension as well. And then, of course, when the scales tip, that's when you're seeing a huge, flip in the norms of society. And of course, we've experienced those things in the last, a few years. Where I know when I was growing up, there were things that are accepted now in our society that were taboo back then, right? Back when I was a kid, there are things, and I'm not necessarily going to mention what they are, that were not acceptable, and now it's just normal, right? It's literally getting, that you are dealing, with some very malevolent spiritual forces when you see that happen in a society. You see the breakdown of people's morality. Right? You see all these things happening. What you're dealing with after you experience it. When targets start to see the hostility, when they start to see, the games and the break-ins, and I caught somebody breaking into my house. Right? I got all these threats, and then it was like the calm before the storm, and I didn't have any idea what I was in for, and then the weird stuff starts happening. And then you come home one day and you see somebody, trying to break into your house, or you get in there and then things are moved around. You start eating stuff out of your refrigerator and you're getting sick and you're throwing up, and then the directed conversations start going along with it. Talk of giving people cancer, tampering with things, deterioration of your health, and so on. And targets deal with that. I know I dealt with it. It's pretty intense, and it will get your attention. People breaking into your house at night. Some targeted individuals talk about sexual assault, about being drugged, all kinds of things. The complete invasion of your life, invasion into your space, invasion into your work, invasion into your mind. And gang stalking involves all those things. And it's not just the targeted individual who is experiencing this type of puppetry. It's the people involved as well. You're their little plaything. Some targets talk about the spiritual vampires. Why do they do these things? Why would they be so, persistent? Why do they care about what I'm doing and what I'm cooking for dinner? What I'm going to be doing this weekend? Why are they, constantly hacking my phone? What's up with my neighbors now? It seems like they're following me around in my apartment. Why all this hostility? Why all this persistence? Well, and you find out that the world that you thought you were in is actually uh, completely different from where you really are. The people you thought you could trust, there's something that you had no idea. You don't know what you're dealing with until you experience this. A lot of people will say that you don't know who your friends are until something bad happens. Well, that's true, but gang stalking is a few levels beyond that, and targets are isolated. Not only are they dealing with a traumatic invasion, they're being sensitized, they're being conditioned, they're being reprogrammed. They're in a state of hypervigilance. The paranoia is increasing, the frustration, but the isolation and deprivation continue throughout this ordeal. And of course, you think it's going to be over. You think that they're going to stop. They'll move on. It's got to get old. You got me, but they just keep coming. They don't back down. Of course, that's part of the theme that the targeted individual is going to deal with too. And they move on into years and decades of dealing with this. And of course, even though the targeting will change, of course, they can't get you to the place where you're bracing for all these things. If you're someone who's survived, some people don't. I've mentioned before, the first couple of years, the first 5 years, a lot of people, they don't make it through that. Some people maybe move to suicide. Other people, they get gaslighted. They just can't fathom that the people around them could be doing the things that they're doing to them. All this talk of mental illness, of course, that fits right along, with the plausible deniability and the covert activity, right? So it's easier for people to accept that sometimes than to believe that their friends, people in their family, that the world around them would be that crazy. And it's just a lot easier to deal with. And they move into that area where they believe it. They internalize the harassment. They believe they're crazy, and some of the gaslighting, they want you to believe you deserve it too, even though, of course, they even though you're mentally ill, you still deserve the hostility. Completely contradictive. Dark puppetry. Gangstalking 101. Let's see who's out there in the comments. Okay, Bora Bora, welcome. Read Ephesians, awesome. Welcome to the live stream. Witness One, Nicholas Boserman, right on. Got a moderator here. And Steve the Pigeon, welcome. Holy Water, welcome to the live stream. City of Fullerton, Gangstalking, glad to have you. Emmanuel Godson, right on. Okay, let's see what's going on out here. Witness One says, can't believe the Lord would make us go through this much torture. Paul talks about the suffering and constant problems. Bet Paul wasn't getting shocked and tech used on him. Well, that's a dilemma that everybody deals with as targeted individuals, and that plays into the environmental tyranny that targets are dealing with. Because you you process information by observation, right? And using the lateral comparison of Paul is interesting. Of course, he suffered a lot for the gospel. He was thrown in prison. He actually was stoned to death. He was whipped. Did all kinds of stuff that he went through. But it seemed to make more sense because, of course, he was being persecuted for the gospel, right? And that it just seems to be a little more, I don't know. It seems more logical, right? That Paul would be, tortured, and that God would want him to suffer for that reason. And so he's a difficult lateral comparison to use. And I've thought of the same stuff before. It's inevitable, especially for people out there who are believers and targeted individuals, right? You have to go into another example. You have to search a little bit further. Joseph was a better example, right? He had no idea what was going on. He was probably one of the best examples of what targeted individuals deal with, that sense of injustice. It seems senseless. It seems completely contradictory. Joseph, his whole, family, with the exception of his father, turned on him. They were going to kill him. He was just a little kid, too. And of course, they threw him into a pit, and they sold him. And then they told his father that, he was killed by a wild animal. And then when he got there to Egypt, all kinds of other things happened to him. And the place where he had been assigned to work as a slave, he got accused of rape and thrown in prison. And he was down there, I think, in prison for 12 years, wondering why. Why is God allowing these things? Why am I suffering? What's going on? Where are you, God? Why don't you deliver me? What is the meaning of all these things? And eventually, of course, after the shackles had made permanent scars in his legs and so on and so forth, well, he was lifted up. He was redeemed. But he had no idea. Then, of course, Job was a good man. And, his whole family was killed. He was afflicted. He was ready to die and basically being tortured to death. Before, I think it was around 6 months before, God intervened, accused by his friends. He dealt with some pretty rough stuff. Targeted individuals are dealing with that. And of course, like I said, one of the hardest things about being a targeted individual is, when you leave your house. Not only are targets, some of them are just downright agoraphobic for all the things they're dealing with, but of course, even if that's not the case, you've got to look at all the people out there that you can't relate with now. They're either perps, or they're living in the world that you used to think was there. Right? They're not worried about people breaking into their house. They're not worried about food tampering. They're not dealing with street theater, directed conversations, workplace harassment. They seem to be doing just fine. And then, of course, it even becomes worse. The plot thickens when you see people out there who are, even blatantly blaspheming God or doing horrible things. And they don't experience gangstalking. Of course, the themes and the accusations that come against the target individual is you deserve it. You're scum. You're a second-class citizen. You're the odd person out. You're a misfit or whatever. And of course, that can't be true, but you don't know because you're dealing with it. Like I said, a lot of targets will buy into this whole gaslighting thing. They don't know how to process the information. And of course, why would God allow it if it wasn't, why? And then people are just getting away with it. It goes on for years and decades. Some people start to believe they do deserve it. And of course, the isolation takes its inevitable effects. The constant surveillance, or the proposition that people are watching them, reading their mind, constantly scrutinizing them. And of course, then they become critical of themselves, after dealing with the innuendos and all the things that come at targets. And they'll use shame mixed in with that. I've talked about that before. you deal with the directed conversation or something like that, or someone's using innuendos, and then, of course, it short circuits the target, because now, instead of just listening to someone in a conversation, it's similar to what happens to targets when they start noticing things like, the car colors or one headlights or whatever. Now, nothing is what it seems. When people are talking to the target, when they've been hit with these innuendos, and usually it involves shameful stuff where they try to embarrass the target, get their ego involved, and then now they're really vigilant. They don't want that to happen again. You're not fooling me. But now the target is paying attention in a way that makes having a conversation, if nothing else, exhausting. You're listening to the words coming out of the person's mouth, but you're trying to figure out what else they're trying to tell you. They might not be doing any of that, but of course, the infection, the infiltration of gangstalking, and the attack of the innuendo has the target looking for double meanings. They're trying to process the surface conversation while figuring out the hidden innuendo that's underneath. And of course, that's not going to work, right? It seems like it's everyone, though. And it totally scrambles the brain of the target. But you have the lateral comparisons. And of course, you're being compared to everyone around you as well. It's just not fair. The sense of injustice is inevitably going to start to mount up unless you realize, the phony, artificial illusion of the world around you, right? The vanity that is around you, the whole thing, if you're one of those targets who uses this opportunity to really see what's around you, not only the people around you and the facades and everything, but just all the things that they're after. Once you see the real world, once you see the evil that's out there and how easily people are manipulated and what's really going on, when you start looking and you see the reality of that, and you know that eventually, all this stuff is going to be done away with. People are chasing after things, and they're really not getting anything, right? It's all just a bunch of cotton candy. It looks like there's a lot there. Once you put it in your mouth, it just dissolves, and you get the sugar rush, and you eat too much of it, you're going to get sick. That's really all this place is, but it doesn't matter, because there's things you need, and you're dealing with so much deprivation and isolation as a target. It's inevitable that you become even more confused, at least at first, if nothing else, because other people aren't dealing with it. There's people that you see them, they're mugshots, they're people in your community. They might be arrested for some of the most heinous things that you could imagine. When they get off probation or when they come back from the penitentiary, people aren't doing anything to them. They're not experiencing any of the harassment that you are. Or you hear about the horrible criminals out there like, Gary Ridgway or Dennis Rader or Ted Bundy or any of these guys. Because a lot of the stuff that even that I've dealt with, some of the directed conversations and foreplay that have come at me before this whole thing, you're a bad person. Oh, you're evil, and so on and so forth. And I've mentioned this before. There was an exorcism at the academy that I went to when I was a teenager, and evidently my name was brought up in the exorcism. And they actually, there was all kinds of weird stuff going on at this place that I went to. And they actually, eventually, they just put me in a room by myself because of insurance purposes, they said. I had never done it. I didn't even do anything, right? I had no connection to any of these people. And you had, the three different incidents. And the final straw was the exorcism. And this girl that was mentally incapacitated starts talking on the girls' dorm, and she normally didn't say anything. And I guess it scared the hell out of everybody. They called up the director, and he calls the priest. And they do this exorcism. And during the exorcism, she brings me up. It says all these weird things about me. And of course, then of course that, oh, we heard about you, yeah, from a demon, you gotta, really, but that's what you're dealing with. And of course, it doesn't add up. Most targeted individuals don't even have a criminal record, but, they want you to believe it. They want you to receive this whole thing when you can see the obvious inconsistencies. I looked into those different cases that I mentioned, whether it's the Gary Ridgway, he didn't have anybody, messing with him at all. In fact, he was, torturing and tormenting the cops, the FBI, just like Dennis Rader. And I think that manhunt went on for 30 years for Dennis. People around him, they didn't know. They had no idea, right? So much for the, the mind reading and the super. Well, some of that's spiritual. And then there's the other aspect. I think that because there is a lot of perps out there. There's people who know about this gang stalking. It's not all just tech and demons. Some of these people are possessed and oppressed, and I think they know about some of that stuff. But of course, like I said, the inconsistency is that none of these people are dealing with it. And as far as I know, they never have. Right? But you get other people who do deal with that. Targeted individuals go out to a restaurant, they get food tampering and everything else, and then you have other people like that they've never even experienced gang stalking. Dennis Rader hung I think an 11-year-old girl from a pipe and pleasured himself while she was dying in the throes of suffocation. Sorry about the graphic info, but no, he lived another 30 years, raised a family, was a homeowner, respected in his community, a deacon in a church, Boy Scout leader. Nobody said a word. Pretty inconsistent, but the lateral comparisons are out there. And it's one of the things that is used. And I've talked about the fact that, when targets, one of the things that is done to targets is they are used as a type of vessel of wrath, in the sense that, whether it's, people who are being coerced as far as the group dynamics, or, the secret societies or whatever, or whether it's experimentation, whatever, they're put in that place of a scapegoat, right? And there's the other agenda, and that's the agenda that corruption in psychiatry. And I've talked about that before. Of course, I've got a bunch of videos on the playlist now that expose that corruption and the lies and the mythos of long-term, cures with pharmacological drugs and all these things that are the reality behind that. We're in, insurance companies and the Social Security Administration had to do an investigation into this whole thing, because it was obvious something had happened, and it wasn't that everybody all of a sudden became mentally ill. There's an agenda. And there's even a darker agenda than that, to obfuscate the spiritual dimension or promote this. And, when it comes to targets, when it comes to the people who are the afflicted out there, well, that's used to discredit them first, to hide the activity, but it also feeds into this. There's a lot of people out there that have been labeled as crazy. Maybe they're locked in mental institutions or forced medicated. And they're just victims, just like all the targets out there listening to this. They're not crazy. Nobody will believe them, though. But you have those lateral comparisons, and it's frustrating. And part of the emotional manipulation, part of that, the vampirism that goes on in gang stalking, has to do with that emotional currency that is created from that. It's just a reality. Let's take a look at some other comments. Okay. Steve the Pigeon says they use criminals to target us. I've seen that. Lindy Elliger, welcome to the live stream. Enough corruption. Welcome. Okay. Go Productive 1178 says, only thing you can do is to recognize witchcraft is real. Well, it is. That stuff is real. And, really, when you get into it, when you get into the true Satanists out there, I mean, there's people in the witchcraft stuff and in the occult, like the Mothers of Darkness and all those people that are involved in the covens, and so that's real. Okay, there's nobody's going to deny that's real. And there's obvious demonic stuff going on there, but really, when you get into Freemasonry, not the low level Freemasonry, but when you get into the higher Freemasonry and the Rosicrucianism and the Illuminati and the Skull and Bones, that stuff is satanic. It's witchcraft in a different way, but as far as the spells and all that stuff, that people do that. I was confronted with a lot of that stuff when I first experienced gang stalking. That was a huge theme. It's different than it is now. And the thing you have to remember is, as far as the solution, people always talk about, what do I do? Well, first of all, you can't control other people. Okay, all you can do is kind of realize what's happening to you and try to cancel out and neutralize the strategy and the motivation to do it, because they want something. Okay, like I've said before, these people are highly motivated, but why? Anytime you see someone doing something, there's always a reason why they're doing it. It might be money, it might be something like that, but it might not be. It might be something like witchcraft, or it might be that spiritual vampirism, or it might be someone who just wants to control you or vent on you or whatever. It could be that they're possessed. It could be a lot of things. There's a lot of stuff going on, but there's always a reason. And, you can't give them what they want. Okay, that just feeds the whole thing. Right? But when you get into witchcraft, and you get into the occult and all those things, those people are the ones that are really being bewitched. And the scary part for targeted individuals who are dealing with that is that, it's bad enough to get bullied and stalked and everything by a bunch of people. But when you're dealing, you throw that in there, and it's just really weird. And I've talked about the fact that whether it's the infiltration into the psyche of the individual with trauma techniques, and reprogramming them through sensitization to read into things or to have propositional tyranny, that can happen with the witchcraft too, right? And I've mentioned that even when you get into MK Ultra and all those things, you can see the similarities that are involved in pagan rituals and things that are involved in witchcraft that make people susceptible to the spiritual dimension. They want that trauma, fear, sleep deprivation, classic, cult techniques, mind control, and ultimately the demons want to take advantage of that. Even when you're looking at the things that were done to people in MK Ultra, I've mentioned before that some of those people, when they get to the place, where they experience that disassociation, along with the drugs and everything, who knows what's going to happen. It makes people susceptible to spirits, and you get into the different altars and so on and so forth, and how people were speculating that that's like a type of psychological oikotarian for the demonic realm, right, where they can come in and start to connect with an individual or control them or even possess them eventually. And how do? You break people down. You break them down mentally, physically, and you make them emotional. You make them vulnerable. And you can see some of the things that people just they think, well, it's all just love potion and love spells and all these little incantations. No, there's a strategy behind that. That's just what they want. That's the bait that the kingdom of darkness uses to get people involved, the allure of power. But really, it has nothing to do with that. They're going to end up controlling those people like puppets and taking them to hell unless they repent. But they'll use them to attack other people, and they will use them as vessels to live in. It's really creepy stuff when you get into that. They put people in a circle, and that this, a type of circle of protection when they're recruiting them to be in their little coven or whatever, and they will show them all this weird stuff. And it's real. It's not just this, a mind trick or whatever. There's real phenomena. I've seen it before. It's creepy. And, usually it happens when people are younger. And then, of course, with the allure of power and sex and drugs and everything, people get involved in that stuff. But, it's too late then. Then you got to fight that whole thing off. And a lot of people, they get driven insane. You get into some of the Catholic exorcisms and so on and so forth. And those people were into, witchcraft and Satanism and so on and so forth. And it's a battle to get away from that stuff. But getting back to what I was talking about, the solution is the same. Okay, you need Christ in your life. I don't care whether you're dealing with the government or whether you're dealing with witchcraft or whatever. It doesn't matter. You needed that before you became a target individual, but you need it even more now that you're being gang-stalked, especially now that there's malevolent evil forces behind all these things. Yeah, there's witchcraft. Okay, let's see what else is out there. Okay. Yeah, Bora Bora. BTK was Dennis Rader up in Wichita, Kansas. He was a sexual predator, torturer, serial killer, sexual sadist that preyed on the community up there in Wichita, Kansas for decades. And he messed with the police, and it was horrific what he did. Pretty weird stuff. There's even more going on with that I'm not going to talk about, but just take my word for it. There's definitely demonic stuff involved in that. Okay. I'm just looking for a comment out there that I can build on. Looks like Chris Steger is still dealing with some harassment. Welcome to the live stream, Chris. And he says, it's really hard. It hasn't let up for a week now. I've never had it go on for so long since my last meth use. Well, that's the scary part, Chris. And I've talked about that before. Some guys, and I'm not trying to scare you or anything, but you can speculate as to what's going on there. I don't know. Some people might look at it as a kind of a warning. When that stuff is happening to you, and you see what's going on. We all slip up. We all make mistakes. But we all have to learn too. And but there's people out there that they'll slip up, and then they'll experience it for extended periods of time. There's targets out there that they were introduced to this whole crazy world of gang stalking through something like that, and it never went away. You're pretty blessed that you have to kind of mess up so far, Chris, for that to be activated against you, because it's just like this. It's like something that's activated. And a lot of people would say, "Oh no, it's just meth. He's just paranoid." No, it's not. I've seen it, and I've seen it up in Great Falls where he is too. And I had it happen to me up there. When I would go off the wagon and get drunk, man, they would come out of the woodwork up there. It was brutal, man. I thought I was going to die. I almost died up there in Great Falls, man, literally. I know exactly what he's talking about. And I ran into some really crazy stuff up there. But I had talked to one of them, and they straight up told me, "We do things different around here. We'll kill your ass." They literally said that to me. and they're not messing around. I know somebody else who's not on the planet anymore that used to live up there, and they messed around and they're gone now. So I just want you to be cool up there, bro. And we can put a prayer out there for you. Lord, I would just pray for Chris that he would find relief, and that these people would back off and let him live his life, and that he could learn from this. If there's something that is connected to this, as far as chastisement or whatever, that it would be a motivation for him to stay away from things that are fruitless and that are just, that we romanticize in our minds and end up, entertaining things. But I just pray that the torment would be lifted up, and also for the people out there who are watching this, that they would also find relief and peace, even if it doesn't stop just in the midst of it. There's a peace that surpasses all understanding, and even in the midst of persecution, we can have that. I just pray in the name of the Lord Christ. And I would say, Chris, that for now, I just keep going and keep your chin up, but don't keep playing around up there, bro. Don't do it, man. And hopefully this is just a warning, but I've seen what happens up there, so. I lived up there for a while, so okay. All right, let's see what else is out there. And that's the confusing part of that, is that for targets who get gang stalking, who maybe have a substance abuse problem, just for people in general, even if they don't, they get labeled as crazy or that they're hallucinating or whatever. And when you mix in some drug addiction or something, it's that much more, it's just that easy. It's that much easier to just credit the person and say that they're just, you're just, smoking crack or whatever. But it's not. It's real. And I think Stephen DeBeek had that experience. Jamie Tall had that experience. There's a lot of people out there who have had. I had that experience. I noticed that I had really bad insomnia, and I started drinking because I was addicted to tranquilizers. But I started hanging out with those kind of people, and I saw some really evil stuff, and there was definitely some spiritual stuff going on there. And I think there's a lot of that out there. And I think that, some of the stuff that people are dealing with as target individuals, it's really hard to tell. But I think that some of the stuff that targets are dealing with is purely demonic. A lot of people will assume that the government's getting a hold of all the people at your job, or that, all the people that are harassing you, whether, you're in different geographical locations, that they're all hooked up to some kind of, MK Ultra program. It doesn't always work that way, guys. Sometimes it's purely, literally demonic. And when you get into, the logistics of gang stalking for people who experience higher forms of harassment, it just goes beyond the human organization. Some of it is, a collusion. Some of it is just, government stalking and harassment and different programs and stuff. But sometimes it's something else. And that's the scary stuff. It's one thing to have people following you around and hacking your phone. It's another thing to deal with a bunch of people who are, freaking, possessed. And it's just creepy. The sad part is there's targets out there who are dealing with all of that, but you don't know. The only thing is that what's happening to you is real. And I always mention this too, that you have to have very strict criteria when you're processing this, because the danger of gang stalking not only is that you can become critical of yourself, or you can be susceptible to gaslighting, or demonic harassment, or all kinds of different things that can happen, where you become sensitized, or you start reading into stuff and have propositional tyranny. But you can get to the place where they will try to drive you crazy, because it's manufactured insanity. There's a way that people go crazy. There's a way that things happen. I remember growing up, people would always do that. Oh, that person's just crazy. I don't know what happened. I was just crazy. That's not realistic. There's a way that things work, whether it's just purely, spiritual, or, rarely, in my opinion, it can be, something that's physical. But I think that's pretty rare. It's like that stuff I brought up with Robert Duncan, who, and I appreciate his work and everything, and exposing, different things that are being done to targets out there, and the technology that's being used and created to harass people for buying control in that totalitarian type of landscape that we were headed into. But for him, he believes that less than 10% of the targets out there are actually experiencing gang stalking, and the rest is just paranoia and mental illness. Less than 10%. By those statistics, there's only like what? Not even 200 people in this channel that are legitimately experiencing harassment. But that's the danger, is that you can get to the place where people will think that, right? But you are being harassed, but everything kind of blurs the fog of gang stalking, and that people do start reading into stuff. I've watched video after video of people out there that they swear they're showing everybody gang stalking, and there's no gang stalking there, man. There's nothing there. They're totally targeted individuals. I wouldn't say that they're crazy at all, because it follows the themes, and I know what they are. But they're reading into stuff, man. And it's easy to do. The first thing that pops into your mind, when you wake up in the morning after you experience this stuff long enough, is just, I wonder what's going to happen next. Wonder what they're going to do. Wonder what I'm going to be dealing with today. And you gotta be careful that you're not looking for this stuff, man. All right, back out there into the comments. Jeremy M., welcome to the live stream. Okay. All righty. MS says, mostly they just want you to appear crazy. Yeah, that is true. And it works, man. That's the science behind this whole thing. It's a huge problem for targets. And I've mentioned that it doesn't matter, if even if you've got evidence, you got to be real careful. And I've talked about that too. I mean, these people, they're willing to do what they're willing to do. If they think they're going to get caught, who knows what they'll be pushed into. And I've talked about that. I've had evidence before. I've got recorded phone conversations. I've got video. I've got all kinds of weird stuff that I would never take to the cops or anything like that, because, first of all, you just don't know who you're going to be dealing with. And, especially in a scenario where, in my opinion, it's spiritual, you could easily run into the wrong person. It doesn't matter where you are. You can run into somebody who's a perp and not know it for a long time. Even you can have some individual infiltrate your life for a honeypot or something, and then they'll come out on you like, whoa, I trusted you, and let alone, something like that. And if you get something out there going, that's all they need, because they want you to get pushed into that place where they can box you in and ask you, 50 million questions. Why would anybody do this to you? Well, who is it? Why, who, why, what we, and of course, any answer you give could possibly be right, but at the same time, it's not going to be believable. On top of the fact that the unorthodox techniques in gang stalking make it, completely, illogical. There's so much plausible deniability. It's like that story I told you guys, depending on how long you've been on this channel, which I'll give you guys something to be, happy about, I guess. If you're my friend. If you're my enemy, you won't like it, but that works for me. No, I'm just kidding. But I mentioned, and this, you can go back and watch the videos on this one. This is proof. Okay. And I talked about it before it happened. Okay, I mentioned several times in a lot of different videos the unorthodox techniques that these gang stalkers will use, right? Just to get your attention or whatever, harass you, whether it's the whistling or, weird behavior or whatever. And one night I was in the grocery store and I was getting my stuff and it was late and there was no one else around. We were in the self-checkout. And of course, there's usually only just one person working there, right? Because it's self-checkout. And this lady, I brought my, stuff up there and I'm checking out, and I'm getting ready to pay for it. And this, gal that was working there, she grabbed one of those little carts. It was a short little cart, those, I don't know what kind of carts you have at the grocery stores, whoever you are listening to this, but there's the long regular carts. And then there's the shorter ones that got the 2 baskets on it. Right. And she grabs one of those and she's laughing at me and looking at me and she grabs it. And she starts walking around in circles in the middle of the self-checkout, looking at me, laughing, walking around in circles. And she did it, she's, I don't know how many circles she walked. It was like 6 or 7 circles and just looking at me. And I'm like, wow, that's weird, but I didn't, I knew it was to get my attention, but I didn't think it meant anything. Right. Well, if you guys have been, watching the channel for very long, you'll know that I have really bad arthritis. Okay, I don't have any cartilage in my knees or my ankles. And it was getting really bad to the point where I was having a hard time walking. And sometime after that, it got so bad that my, one of my legs literally would lock up. After I would sit down for a certain amount of time, it would be almost in a 90-degree angle. And so every morning, or if I, sat down for too long, I would have to, basically, lean over like a countertop. And it was getting so bad that it would take me an hour or 2 just to straighten out my leg, right? And so there was a guy that, was doing a lot of salvaging around here, and he had one of those little shopping things. And I thought, well, that'd be good. I don't want, a walker just wasn't working because I would have to, basically move around on this. So I bought it for $5. And I didn't even think about what happened in the grocery store. But I had to do that for 3 years. It was about 2 years, guys. I had that, and I just finally took that shopping cart outside and put it outside because with my exercises and my change in diet, I finally got my legs so it doesn't lock up that bad anymore. But I had to use that thing for around 2 years or more, and I would have to walk around in circles with that little cart in my living room every day before I went to work. Is that weird or what, man? But that's the kind of stuff you get. I mean, I'm telling you guys, but I wouldn't tell anybody else. Who's going to believe something like that, right? That's not a coincidence. But anyway, progress report. I just took that sucker outside a couple days ago, man, and I still have to, straighten my leg out a little bit, but nothing like that. Not for an hour or 2. So praise God on that one. But yeah, who's going to believe you? Some of the stuff that targets deal with is just crazy. All right, let's see what's out here. Jeremy M says, tunnel vision. Yeah. Make no eye contact and use headphones. They hate it. Yeah, that's true. That's good advice, Jeremy. Because if you don't see it, it can't bother you. And I've that's true. Because once targets start looking for this stuff, to trigger you, they'll do whatever they have to do. They'll smirk. They'll, they'll wink at each other. They'll say, it doesn't matter. If you're not looking for it or you're not listening, because I don't even need headphones anymore. I don't even care. But, at the same time, that's how you get triggered. And you can even bring it on yourself. It's kind of a joke, but I think it was Nicholas Bosserman or somebody else was joking around about that, is that, you're looking around and then people are looking back at you and you think they're gang stalking you, but you just look paranoid. They're just, tripping out on you. They're wondering why you're looking at them, and you think that everybody, and you're just kind of bringing it on yourself at that point, but you don't, that can happen. And it's easy, to fall into that mechanism of gang stalking, but you don't want to be looking for it. That's good advice, Jeremy. You want to be looking straight ahead. You want tunnel vision, absolutely. That's great advice. You don't want to be listening to what people are doing. You don't want to be, trying to figure out, if possible, live in the now, live in the present. Don't worry about yesterday. Don't worry about what's going to happen in the future, and do not look or react for this stuff. And if you do, try to think about something else, and remember the time increment, right? Time is important, to remember when you're dealing with this, because it is going to piss you off. You're going to get triggered. There's going to be things that frustrate you. There are going to be things that activate you, and there's going to be some emotion. They love it, but you got to remember, especially if they, get all unorthodox on you and get in your face and try to yank your chain, completely unjust scenarios are going to happen to targets. And you got to forget about that. And then, look at your watch or look at a clock or whatever, and just, try not to say anything or think about it for like an hour. Okay. Because I've been tempted to fly off the handle. Okay. I have to do this every day. Okay. And, then of course you got a chain reaction, because they love to trigger the target, because then they can manufacture justification and then accuse you of stuff, and then shame you in front of people. Oh, look at you. You're a triggered target. And you'll get so mad. Oh, take it easy. Calm down. And then of course it just pisses you off even more or whatever. Or they will accuse you, boy, did you wake up on the wrong side of the bed? And you're just giving them ammo. You don't say anything. Try not to think about it. In an hour, it's going to be easier. In 2 hours, it's going to, it might take a few hours. It might even take all day, but eventually it's going to go away, because, if you let those emotions rise up in you, I've come pretty close. And I just, you start swearing, or you get in a negative. Now they're controlling you. Now you're in a bitter you're bitter, you're pissed off, you become pessimistic. Demons will take advantage of that stuff too. And they'll have reciprocity, and they'll try to use multiple perps if they can do that too. So you get your chain yanked in one place, and then they'll get you going, and you'll have that emotion going, and then they'll just it'll, by the end of the day, you'd be lucky to survive. You might just you'd be better off just going hiding under your covers for 48 hours but you don't have to. If you just don't let it, don't let it start. Don't let that chain reaction begin. And it's hard, but you got to be prepared for it. And then that's another technique that goes into why sometimes targets will experience no harassment. And it might stop for a while, maybe even a year or two or more. And it'll change. And they'll get you to the place where you're totally, involved. Maybe you're trying to, get together with somebody, you can get married or whatever, and then they'll come and blah, smash the sandcastle, and he's just like, oh man, and they want you to fly off. They want to provoke you. They want to get you emotional, and they will feed on that. I mean, there's a lot of speculation as to how that works, but there's a lot of different things that people are getting out of this stuff, and it's not just money, and they get off on it. I don't know how, we've talked about that before. Whether they're really getting something from you, or it's just their spiritual handlers that are giving them a boost, and the spirits are just kind of feeding on you, and sucking the life out of you and breaking you down and getting you into that place of despair and intense speculation and apprehension and pessimism and everything. That's what they do. That's their job. They're not just running around willy-nilly. When they come after you, they have a reason, and they want to break you down and mold you, get you to internalize all these things, provoke you into a place where they can accuse you, use the manufactured justification, get you into a place where you're moldable, vulnerable, and they can gaslight you, inform you, devour you, and destroy you. Ultimately what they want. Good advice, though, Jeremy. Enough Corruption says, I've been filmed more than Brad Pitt since '95. Hilarious, man. There's a movie out there. It's like that. What was that? That Final Cut movie with Robin Williams. You'll see it on the Rememory. Okay. Yeah. Well, Chris Steger says they definitely have an idea in the beginning, I believe, because later when the house of cards comes crumbling down, then it's 2020. It is hindsight's 2020. That is true. And that's what I was talking about when I talked about the plan or the setup. And that's all targets deal with that. That's a good point, Chris, because when you do find yourself surrounded, man, and you're just moving along, you're bebopping along or whatever happens, and then you're like, whoa, and it is 2020, you know, and you remember all that stuff and you remember what's going on, and they love to set you up, dude. They love it, especially like what Chris is talking about with meth or whatever. I've had that happen of where people would set me up. They would have all kinds of little comments and stuff like that. When I went to treatment up there in Great Falls, that happened to me up there, man. And I was surrounded by perps, even in treatment, and they were saying things and talking about things, what they were going to do. I thought they were just kind of nuts. And then they all come over to my house one night, and they all showed up at once, like 20 people, man, over off of 10th Avenue. I think it was Halloween night. And it was just creepy, the stuff they were doing, dressed up like witches and stuff, man. It was like freaky. But it was right at the time where I started drinking again. And they reminded me of all that stuff. It was all 2020 at that point, bro. Yeah, they do that. That's what they do. Oh, they love to set up. They love the foreplay. I've had a lot of them comment to me, we're masters of foreplay and all this stuff. And they love it. They love to play God. The thing you got to remember is that they're condemning themselves. This whole thing that they're setting themselves up. Yeah, you got me. Whatever. But it's a double-edged sword. Yeah. Okay, let's see what else is out here. Yeah, Steve the Pigeon said, I've had perp friends placed into my life with drug problems trying to turn me into an addict. Oh, yeah. That's the beauty of it. They'll give it to you for free. It's everywhere. They might even slip you the drugs. I've had that happen too. Oh, you're gonna come on, it's gonna be fun. And you don't want to do it, and they'll dose you. Oh, come on, you like it, don't you? You're just like, wow. Yeah. Yeah, and then the funny thing is when you try to get away, a lot of guys will get into the place where they're using substances, whatever it is, to deal with stress. And then the targeting happens, and then it's just over the top. But you try to quit. It's bad. Even for people who are not gangstalking victims, sometimes they got to leave their city or state just to get away from these people. That's spiritual. Right? I've done it before where whatever it was, I would quit. And I would, I'd even tell people they would all show up with drugs, free drugs. People that wouldn't even give you a pinch hit or something have, show up with huge, dumping it on the table. Here, just have some, and you're like, wow, this is creepy. I should have just told you guys I was quitting before and you'd have gave me something, but it's yeah. And for people who are gang stalking victims, man, they'll come out of the woodwork. Yeah, Nicholas Boserman says that he had a tweaker buddy tell him, be careful what you think because it's out there. Yeah, he was totally priming you for later. Yeah, absolutely. What are you talking about? It's out there. Yeah, it is out there, though, isn't it? And like Chris was saying, when it all comes crumbling down, then it's like, whoa, you're surrounded. You are surrounded at that point. Holy Water says, does anyone feel like their head is about to explode when trapped in public transport with stalkers for a few stops? You just can feel their mind on you. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's a good example of some of the things that happen. Because when before you weren't even thinking about this, and then as you become targeted, as you experience all this stuff, you of course you're dealing with all these things in a whole new possible. All these different possibilities are opened up to you that you didn't know about before. And a lot of targets will deal with the clairvoyant stuff, the demonic stuff. There's a lot of speculation as to whether people can read, your mind or whatever, or whether it's some kind of demonic trick, whether they throw thoughts in your head and kind of bait you and then throw stuff in the other individual's mind and get them to say something that would lead you to believe that they're reading your mind. Or it doesn't matter. I mean, it's possible that they can do that. I mean, I've experienced some pretty weird stuff. Okay. So we'll just assume hypothetically that some of that stuff is possible, or the technological explanation for that kind of thing. Well, you weren't thinking about none of that before. And so now just, it causes a glitch. I mean, it's like, don't think of pink elephants. And what happens? You start thinking about whatever it is you're trying not to think about. And so that happens to targets. So now that this whole possible world of, technology and witchcraft and everything is opened up to the target, and you're on a transit or on a bus or a vehicle or, in a building or in a mall or something, and you're stuck and it happens. It's enough to give you that claustrophobic panic attack, and a lot of targets will get to the place where they don't want to leave the house anymore because that will happen to them. You're stuck. There's nothing you can do. There's no escape, and all of a sudden it happens. And then, you get the attack, and then, and there's going to be other things happening to you as well. And yeah, that's common for targeted individuals. I used to deal with that a lot, along with the withdrawals that I was experiencing from the benzos. You combine that all together. I had it one time where that happened to me in a big mall out in Seattle, and it was up past Renton, and I think I was looking for a PlayStation game or something, and I was looking for this shop that was supposedly like in the middle of this huge mall. It was huge, man, and it took me forever, and I'd never been there before. And, all of a sudden, it just happened, and people started acting weird, and it was just creepy. And, I got the panic and the claustrophobic feeling, all this, that I could barely breathe, man. And it was like they were coming out of the woodwork on me, and I had to get out. I mean, I just got into the middle of the mall, and that's when it kicked off. And I had to go. I wasted the whole trip there, but now I don't care. Now, I mean, you can acclimate to that stuff and get to the point where you just don't care about it anymore. If somebody wants to do that. But I mean, before, when I was, addicted to all those tranks and everything, you get the withdrawals, you mix it in with, that was a hell of an opportunity for the perp. But, when targets first experience this stuff, like I said, it causes that type of chain reaction. And you don't know what's going on, man. I mean, there's targets out there who, they swear people are walking around with psychotronic devices reading their mind, or they're possessed, or they're using witchcraft, and it freaks you out. And you feel trapped. You get on a bus, or, you're stuck in line at the grocery store. You can just leave all your stuff and go, just walk away, But that happens. That's something that, you got to be prepared for. And like I said, you have to consider the source of your attackers first, because it's easy for people to be intimidated because they feel like a lesser citizen. It's very common for targeted individuals to feel inferior to all these people that are abusing them and attacking them, whatever they're dealing with, because you're the odd person out. You're isolated, and everybody knows except you. So you're the only one that's not, and you're left out. And all the communication and the themes that are coming at the target is you're just not good enough, or you're a second class citizen, or you're just a freak or a misfit, and it's everybody against you, and it's easy to internalize that inferiority complex. And if there is something, that you're not aware of. You're getting demonically attacked, or people are using witchcraft or technology on you or whatever, and now you're going to feel even more embarrassed. But you got to consider, who you're dealing with. Usually people come out of that because they finally realize that, if anybody's, blowing their horn that loud, they probably got more skeletons in their closet than the people that they're attacking. It's hypocritical, especially when you get into the innuendos. And you got to realize that anybody who would spend their God-given time and resources doing this is, very desperate and inferior. I mean, it's like some of the people out there that I won't mention their name that, they believe that targeted individuals are mentally ill. Okay. But yet they're picking on them. Yet they are abusing them and abrasively harassing them and so on and so forth. Well, that's pretty inconsistent. What does that say about somebody that's doing that? Well, they're weak, right? They're a mental midget. They are. You wouldn't do something like that otherwise. And then you get, targets like I've talked about this before. They're showering in the dark, or they just feel like people are watching them, and they get into self-scrutiny, which ends up turning into scrupulosity in the mind of the victim. And demons will do that to people too, where now they're criticizing themselves, or they're having contradictory thoughts, and it's like, we're in your head now. Enjoy all that, but you have to realize, the weakness of the perp. You have to realize the pusillanimous nature of these people that you're dealing with, and you should not be afraid of them. You should not be intimidated. They are the ones that should be embarrassed. So somebody puts a damn camera in your bathroom. You're the one that's supposed to be embarrassed? Really? That they're spending their God-given time and resources, harassing you or hacking your phone. They could be doing anything, and they're not, though. They are the ones that bear the burden of shame. They are the ones that are going to, eternally regret this stuff unless they repent. And when you finally start, considering the source of your criticism and realizing the hypocritical dynamic that is involved in, the bullying factor that you are presented with in gang stalking, is that the only people that would do that is people who need to step up. They need to one-up somebody because there is an obvious lack of something in their life, and they're trying to make up for it. And the only way they can do it is to gang up on someone. And it just shows how small, weak, and pathetic that they really are. And you should never be ashamed or afraid of someone like that. Going back into the comments again. Okay. All right. Enough Corruption says these people derive joy from all the harm that they do. And that's another important thing. Really? What kind of psychopathy would you have to have in order to be, all giddy and pleasurable about doing something nasty and harmful to someone, right? That takes a particular type of, psychological condition, and it's not a good one. You hear about people, people speculate that these people are just trying to recruit you. You get harassed for a few years or whatever, and a lot of targets they'll come to the conclusion, well, maybe they just want me to join. Maybe they want me to just, turn and become one of them. And it's, but would you really be able to do that? You're deceiving yourself. They were picked for this. They were critiqued, molded, and they're special people, and not in a good way. Okay. Normal people are not going to be able to do that and just, going, I think it's time for lunch now. I just ruined somebody's day. This is good. That would make a normal person feel like crap. You'd be up at night, gee, I shouldn't have done that or whatever. It's proof of the soulless nature of these people, of the void that they have, the deadness that is beyond their eyes, the blackness that is inside them, the lack of regeneration and life, and you just wouldn't be able to do it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Jeremy M says this whole experience has made me obsessed with myself. I'm assuming that you're not joking. I mean, if you're joking, that's okay. But that's one of the goals. You know, I mentioned that before. I do believe in this video and in several other videos that they want you to process information in a personal way because they're going to accuse you of being self-centered. All targets are the whole world is all, and it's all about you, right? But they want you to believe it, man. They want you sitting around staring at your own belly button, wondering when the next attack is going to come. That's what they love, right? And then they can accuse you because that's part of the whole menagerie of gang stalking is they get the target, critiqued, paranoid, sensitized, conditioned, and processing information differently. They reprogram them, and so they are reading into stuff, right? It's inevitable. It happens to everybody. Okay, it happens to everybody that gets gang stalking. They're inevitably going to read into something, right? But the whole thing is that now, how are you going to, respond to that? We'll just say that you did get something wrong. We'll say you read into time to shame yourself. Is it time to feel guilty? Is it time to realize that it's a natural reaction to what you've experienced? Because that's one of the motives, right? That's why when people are out there and they're noticing things and they're making videos about stuff that's not gang stalking, it's time not to be shamed. It's not time to attack those people. It's just, you try in the kindest way you can to just be nice to them or whatever. Eventually they're going to realize that, they're under a type of tyranny. They're moving from, being, traumatized into sensitization and into a type of propositional tyranny. Right, because they're processing information that way. They don't know. They don't know what's going on. And it's easy to discredit somebody like that. But like I said, it's a natural reaction. So part of being a targeted individual is processing information in a strict way. You're not looking for it anyway. Stop looking for it. That's first. Second, if something happens, ignore it. And third, it doesn't really matter if people are doing it because you know that they're going to do it anyway. The only significance that it's going to have to you is the significance that you give it. It takes two to tango, right? It does. Don't, if they're going to try and, discredit you, let them do it. They want you to do it. That's one of the whole, that's the foundation of gang stalking is that they turn you into your own handler. You're critical of yourself, or you're shaming yourself. You're reading into things, right? Or you're sitting around, ruminating about gang stalking. They don't even have to do anything to you anymore. They don't have to attack you, right? They just have to, yank your chain every to walk by you and whistle or do something, and it's on, and you're thinking about all of it. And I've talked about the associations that happen after someone is sensitized and attacked with that type of trauma-based mind control is that now a lot of other things that might not even have to do with gang stalking become associated in your mind. And if you don't have something to distract you, if you're not trying to do something productive, if you don't try to cancel out that chain reaction, you're going to ruminate. That's a default program of everyone's mind. And I mentioned that in the last couple of videos, even if it's a doctor's appointment or something, if you're just going to sit there, it's like insomnia. If you're just going to sit there and you can't sleep and you finally realize you're probably not going to fall asleep, rather than to just sit there and stare at the ceiling and think about everything that you don't want to think about. It's time to get up and do something, because if you don't, it's just going to play into that. You don't want to be thinking about whatever it is. You don't want to ruminate. It's a default program in your mind. Process information according to what you know about the strategy of the harassment, right? Because that's what they want. When you find yourself being triggered, you're conditioned. Okay, so what do? Well, you realize what's happening, right? A lot of that happens in the target individual community. You might try to hook up with somebody and explain what's going on, and they'll minimize you. Oh, I don't know, man. I don't know if that was gang stalking, man. I think you're just crazy. I never heard no voices before, or whatever's going on. And that right there, you got to know they're trying to trigger you, man. Right? What do? Well, you certainly don't want to get in an argument. You certainly don't want to get angry or get emotional or try and justify yourself or get on a tangent. It's only going to build. It's only going to get worse. You don't want to make it worse. People like that, you just, oh yeah, you're probably right, man. Drop it. If you can tell right there and then, if they bring it up again, try and get you all riled up that they're a perp. Use it to your advantage. Okay. Angela Cahill says, yes, ignoring them is key. It is. Yeah, Nicholas Boserman says they want to, yeah, they do. They want to turn you into your own handler. That's what happens. And you see a lot of targets. That's happened to me. You don't need, they don't have to do anything to you anymore. It's all an invasion into your mind. It's like, I think I made a video about that called Mind Virus a long time ago when I first started the channel. A lot of people got mad at me, and I'm like, you don't understand what I'm trying to tell you. I'm not saying that what you're experiencing is, just a figment of your imagination. I'm just saying that it's once they do this to you, that's the strategy. I mean, it could be a squirrel running around on your roof or something, and what are you going to think? Damn gang stalkers. They're doing it again. Somebody slams their car door or something loud, and they're just visiting your neighbor. There they are again. It might not have anything to do with you. And, you have to let it get to the point where it's so obvious that there's no other answer. And then, even then, you just, use it as a way to prevent the gaslighting later, because, it happens. This stuff can be so subtle. Once a target is sensitized and conditioned, man, they don't have to do anything anymore. They don't have to, be obvious. They have to do just the most subtle things to get your attention, and it will cause that trigger. It will cause that conditioning to kick in, man. You got to short circuit it. You've got to neutralize it, period. It's foundational. I have to remember that every day. Okay. Okay. Well, guys, I think I'm gonna have to get going here. It's been a good live stream though, and I appreciate you guys coming in, and I appreciate the moderators keeping everybody in line and keeping it clean. And this is something that we do for affirmation, because targeted individuals are isolated. Okay, I know that I wouldn't know what to do without you guys, and it's confusing. Enough being isolated, but it's great to get together and hear what's going on. Like I said, hopefully, Chris, if you're still out there, things will get better for you. I appreciate you sharing those details with us, and like I said, Godspeed to you, and everybody else as well. If you're out there and you're dealing with heavy harassment that's just oppressive, and you think that it's over, it's not. Take it from someone who's experienced this stuff for decades. Just when you thought it's, just when you think it's over, God can come through, and He never fails, and He's always faithful. I'd like to thank everyone who participates in these live streams. I'd like to thank everyone who helps support me in the channel. The link is in the description. Don't forget to hit the like button, guys. God bless. Be good to yourselves. Be safe.